If you know this man, you get automatic 10 points. Okay, we're going to be discussing the Riz Law. We all know that Rizal had a lot of women. Okay, so the Rizal Law. First, let's go to the dates because history is important, kids. History helps us learn from the mistakes of the past, and we're totally not repeating our mistakes currently in the world, and everything is going really badly. But okay, anyways, history. Okay, so here's the story. So, President Emilio Aguinaldo, he was a president back then in the 19th century. Late 19th century, very late 19th century. So, on December 20th, 1898, he issued a decree for Rizal Day. Who is Rizal, the national hero of the Philippines? This dude, the Rizzler. So, oh god. Okay, I just used Rizzler. Okay, so basically the context was Emilio Aguinaldo had two options. He could make it so that Jose Rizal could be the national hero of the Philippines and he would symbolize Philippines. Someone who was a pacifist and was a reformer, wanted to change things through the systems. Or he could choose Andres Bonifacio, who was a radical and prioritized action over reformation. Andres Bonifacio was someone who led the KKK. If you don't know the KKK, it's fine. We're studying Rizzal Law. But basically, he took action rather than trying to prioritize dealing with the law and, you know, writing novels. Was as compared to Rizal, he Rizal wrote stuff, and Emil was like, okay, you know what? Let's choose the guy who is more of a pacifist and does not resort to action, because I also want to maintain my power for a few more years, because influence and power and all that is yummy. Anyways, so he issued a decree. What if we made Rizal's birthday, which is June 19th, as a Rizal Day to commemorate him? And the Philippine Commission took about 4 years to think about it. And on February 1st, they affirmed the decree and stating that June 19th is Rizal Day. We celebrate Rizal and we remember him like we're remembering him now. Fast forward to 54 years later, almost half a century, the Senate Bill 438 was released. So, what is Senate Bill 438? It's also related to Rizal because we're studying the Rizal Law. 438, essentially, the summary of it is they want to put in to mandate schools to include in their curriculum the works and life and the history of Jose Rizal, the national hero. So the bill was passed on May 17th, 1956, thankfully in the same year and not 4 years. And then on June 12th, on 1956 of the same year, it was signed by President Ferdinand Magsaysay into law, which is known as the Republic Act 1425. This law has three sections. Firstly, the first section states that Rizal's works in history must be included in the school curriculum, public or private. Second section states that every library within the school would have copies of the original works of Rizal. It could be translated into the dialects of the Philippines or into English, but it must be original. It must stay true to the original source material. Section 3 states that, yeah, the translations, regarding the translations, you can translate the works, but it has to be very loyal to the original work. Okay, we've gone over the history. Now we go to the antis versus the pros. I'm not gonna read all of their names because that'll take a long time, but basically, the church was against it. Most of the church was. So let's go to the antis first. So the main argument of the church was that the law would force students to read a text that had religious overtones. If you know the works of Rizal, which prominently are No Limitangere and El Filibusterismo, you would know that there was a lot of parts in the novels that criticized corrupt, let me emphasize that, corrupt priests corrupt leaders. And basically, there was a prominent figure in the novel that was a really bad person. And I'm not going to spoil it for you. But the church didn't like that, basically. They did not want a text to be distributed to schools and taught to many students because they believed that these young people would be so influenced by novels would start to hate the church. Yay! 1 point for the church. And Jesus Cavana, one of the ones anti Rizzal Law, he said that the novel belongs to the past. Like he was like, you know, we're over it, right? Like he got killed already, and the things that happened in the past, it's not happening anymore. I swear. Wink, wink. Little did we know, it actually is still happening. So, what the church said in order to gain the belief of common people, they included that they made it seem that Clara M. Rector is the one who wrote the bill, by the way, that he wanted to punish Catholics who didn't vote for him during the elections by reading the text. What happened basically was when you didn't have good relationships with the Americans back then, since they mostly had the power over the Philippines, during that time, you would be branded as a communist. And with the side of the church branded communists as bad Catholics. And surprise, surprise, Senator Recto was labeled as a communist because he didn't have good relations with the Americans because he wanted Filipinos to develop their own sense of independence and nationalism, which the Americans didn't really want at that time. So the church, siding with the Americans and wanting to maintain their power over the country, they label him as a bad Catholic and put him in a bad light to most people. They're like, don't vote for him. You guys didn't vote for him. That's why he's trying to author this bill because, you know, he wanted to punish y'all. And yeah. And the church also threatened that schools would be shut down if the bill was passed, which is a really bad defense on their part because most of the schools during that time was led by priests, and most of the funding that was received by the schools funded the church. So, I don't know, but that seems like a really bad plan. If you shut down the schools, then the sort of money would be shut out, and the church wouldn't have any more money. So I don't know what he was thinking or they were thinking when they were defending it like that. Anyways, basically they had really bad arguments, and they tried to make amends with those bad arguments by making the pros be seen in a bad light. So let's go to the pros. So their main argument, we want to pass this law so that youth would read these texts, would learn about the history of the Philippines and the colonialism, and they would foster a civic consciousness and allow them to develop a sense of nationalism, even at a young age. They simply wanted to help the next generation of Filipinos develop a sense of unity, a sense of identity as a Filipino, be proud of who they are. That's all they wanted. Seriously. And the major parts of the pros were Arsenio Lacson, which was a very known as a very honest, direct man. He was tough, but he was honest, and he served the interests of the people. He was a true nationalist. And we also have Father Horacio de la Costa, which is a brave part of him because he is part of the church, but he still, supported the bill. But in the end, he actually was asked to, on the down low, he's like, maybe you should tone down the support for the bill because this kind of shows people that the church is not unified. So maybe, Horacio, come on, man. Come to our side, my brother. They're like that. So he kind of decreased his support, but he was still a little bit more vocal, at least, than most of the church people. Anyways, let's move to the pros. So the pros also basically they wanted to remove the colonial mentality, which is the colonial mentality. That mentality refers to when you see foreigners as better than you are. Like, it's your country, right? The Philippines is the country of Filipinos. Filipinos live in the Philippines, but if a Filipino has colonial mentality, they would be like, "Oh my God, America is so much better than the Philippines. Oh my God, they have so better laws there, better everything." And it's fine if you compare your nation to another one because you could learn of how they're developing their own laws, how they're thriving, because the Philippines is a third world country. But it gets bad when it reaches a point wherein you simply just look at the Philippines with a very, very low perspective. You think of them as below other nations, basically. So that's what the colonial mentality is. And Recto authored the bill so that he could help the youth back then to not develop that same mentality that the previous generations had. So the bill was very much an integral part of history, and up until now, it's still actually being implemented. Life and works of Rizal is being included within college curriculums and universities, and it's also part of high school curriculums. You would grade 7, grade 8, which is basically the first 2 years of high school in the Philippines, are mandated to include at least a few Filipino works, especially the ones by Rizal, No Limitang Harian El Filibusterismo. And it has helped in development of civic consciousness. So, hooray, they won. They did win, actually. They did. Maybe I should have started with that. They did win. The Rizal Law was passed. So, yep. This is the man, the myth and the legend, Rizzal. That's the Rizzal Law.